I have had a hard time making adult decisions since that day in the car. I'm 40. What was the most damaging thing a parent said to you when you were growing up? Got 85% on an exam. My dad said, "Where is the other 15%? Edit, I am not Asian." My mother locked me out of the house, and told me to never come back after I told her boyfriend of a week to get away from my dog. The bastard kept hitting my dog. Took the dog and fled to my dad's. I was 12 at the time. Me and my little brother had been naughty, nothing special, just regular kids naughty. We had an older brother and sister, they were twins. Mum took us into the bedroom to punish us. "We didn't plan to have you. You were accident. We chose to have your older brother and sister. You were accidents." Me, about 8 or 9, "That's terrible. You can't say that to kids. I will remember this when I grow up." My brother, 7, cries. Mum shuts up fast. 30 years later the subject came up and she denies it ever happened. Except my younger brother also still remembers it. Not directly said to me, but being 13, coming home to my alcoholic mother's suicide note on the kitchen table. It essentially told my dad he should have married ex-woman who he cheated on her with years earlier. Had some strange goodbyes and duck yous doled out in his direction. I had never run up that flight of stairs so fast. Found her face down in bed. Didn't think she was breathing. Empty Magnum bottles of wine strewn everywhere. After jostling her for a while she finally stirred and I knew she was alive. I told her unconscious drunk ass that I loved her to death, and would be heartbroken if she did something stupid. I left, taking the note with me. Never mentioned it to anyone in my family. My mom doesn't remember even writing it. Decades later, I still can't stomach the stench of cheap white wines, Rieslings, Chardonnays. Not me, but a friend of mine grew up with an alcoholic mother who changed boyfriends quite frequently. One boyfriend in particular started to rape my friend at the age of 9 years old when her mom was passed out. It went on for a couple of months before my friend finally told someone. The cops came around to arrest him. Her mom lost her crap and started yelling at the cops, demanding an explanation. One of the officers straight up said, "Because he rapes your child, that's why," in front of my friend. She then looked at her daughter, at her boyfriend, and then back to the cop and asked, "Why can't you just take her?" When I was 15, my sister went to the principal following a huge fight my stepdad and I had had the night before. Where I finally said out loud what he had been doing for the past 11 years, and he hit me. Then my mom jumped in and got unusually protective of me and stood up to him, for once. I ran into my room, and sat on my bed freaking out about what was going to happen, and my sister was doing her best to comfort me. She was only 12. Then my mom walked in, stared at me, and signs, "She's deaf, well. Now you have to listen to me, and do your chores from now on." The jaws dropped on both my sister and I. I told her to duck off. So next day, it's going down all over school and town because that's what happens when your sister tells the principal her dad is a pervert. It was a bad up week. My mom went Mia for 2 days, while I had to figure out how to take care of my 2 younger siblings. Turns out she went to her best friend's house to drink coffee and gossip while my stepdad gets arrested in front of her kids, and we get carted off to where she's comfortably resting. I asked her if she knew this had been going on, and she stared at me for a solid 10 seconds before deciding to reply with, "Well, if you hadn't always walked around in pajamas and seduced him, he wouldn't have been interested." Thing is, it started when I was 6. I'm good, but I wasn't that good. I'd like to say that was the worst thing she's done, but it's one of those that always stuck with me. I'm sure it was her brain's weird way of coping with the news that her husband had been molesting her oldest daughter right under her nose, and she ignored it. But she's deaf and crazy, so who knows what goes on in that head. When I was a kid my dad used to hit me. I had to help him with his work constantly, and when I did something wrong he would either mimic hitting and tower over me, or if he'd gotten angry enough, just hit me. Anyways, after a while I started flinching over every sudden movement he did near me. Sometimes it was so bad that I dropped something, or literally injured myself by moving into something. He thought it was funny. He made jokes to other people about how you didn't have to even touch me to injure me, I'd do it to myself. I was just a kid back then. It took me a couple of years to realize how wrong the whole situation was. The reason why I flinched was because I was afraid there was a slap or a punch or yes, even a kick coming my way. That was just the first thing of many that popped into my mind. What sucks is that I get these flashbacks of his actions, and sayings sometimes, some that my mind had suppressed, and they just make me so angry. Direct quote would be something like this: "You don't even have to hit him, he'll injure himself." I was sexually abused by my older brother for several years as a child until he moved out, and never told my family. I ended up actually forgetting it ever happened until 7th grade. I assume I repressed it. Well, I told a close friend and she took me to see a counselor who went to her church. Nothing ever happened with it. Fast forward to my sophomore year in high school, I was given 70 hours community service for truancy, and if you and a parent did this group therapy thing, it'd knock off 40 hours. The counselor who did it was the same counselor who I told about my brother, who, in turn, told my dad what happened. His response? That explains her grades. I cried about it for weeks. Edit, my mother was worse than my dad, and I want everyone to know I don't hold what my dad said against him. My mom is a bad person in general, who makes my distressed dad sound like parent of the year. When she found out, she cried for about 2 minutes, sucked it up, and then explained that her mother, herself, and I all were sexually abused by a family member. That we got over it and so should you. This just didn't hurt my feelings so much because she was always rude. Not something they said, more like didn't say. When I was 5 I was taken to the hospital for countless research sessions, then afterwards I received pills that I needed to take every single morning before going to school. I never questioned any of this, but my parents never said anything about it for over 7 years. Turns out that I had been diagnosed with ADHD, and that I was being given Ritalin. I spent my entire childhood feeling weird and out of place among kids my age. Since it was obvious that my behavior was entirely different from theirs, and everyone was able to do a lot of things I couldn't. Instead of sitting me down to explain the situation, and explain that some kids are just different from others and that nothing's wrong with that, they simply watched and did nothing while I convinced myself that I'm a completely malfunctioning kid who will never fit in with anyone. I later found out I had ADHD, started doing research, stopped taking Ritalin and consciously changed my routines and social behavior so that I'd function better in school. I'm now 24, have a college degree, and have a job that I excel at. All this took was some documentation about how my brain works. My parents probably never told me anything about it because they didn't want me to feel like I was different, but the effect was exactly opposite to that intention. The day I started researching ADHD was the day I became a useful human being. Mom and dad are divorced, I live with mom. I'm 15. Mom decides to move 500 miles away. Dad, over about 6 months, repeatedly tells me that by law I'm old enough to make my own decision about whether to go with her, or stay with him. Tells me I'm a man now, and he would respect my decision, over and over and over. Agonizing decision, I decide to go with mom, haven't told him yet. He calls me one day and says he needs my decision today. Picks me up and takes me to Dairy Queen. In the car he tells me again to not be scared, either decision is okay, I'm a man now, and he will respect the decision. In tears, I tell him I'm leaving. He immediately reaches in the back seat and hands me an envelope. I open it and it is a summons for me to appear in court the day before we leave. Had to get up in court to say I wanted to go with my mom. Luckily the judge thought this was ridiculous, took me and my dad's lawyer to his chambers, yelled at the lawyer, called him a disgusting person, kicked him out of the room, and asked me what I wanted to do. I said go with my mom. He said cool. Walked out, left the next day. I have had a hard time making adult decisions since that day in the car. I'm 40. Like and subscribe for more funny, interesting, and scary r/ask Reddit videos.